You know what app I use on my phone more than any other app, besides the podcast app, to listen to this here podcast? I use onX. onX Maps is the most comprehensive mapping system for hunters on the market today. I use it all the time. When I was in New Mexico, I was looking at 40,000 acres of ranch that I needed to learn. I flip open onX and just start studying the map. When I'm riding trails, I put the tracking app on. It helps me get around in strange country. I could mark water sources, food sources, bear sign, just all kinds of options within onX. You need to check out onX Maps by going to houndsmanxp.com. Click on the link on our sponsor page. You'll go right to onX Maps, and when you check out, enter the code HXP20 and you will get 20% off of your order. Know where you stand with onX. Check out Cajun Lights, your complete dog hunting outfitter. Tracking equipment, leashes, collars, dog supplies, and much, much more. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. And don't forget their outstanding lineup of lights. You can find it all at CajunLights.com. Elite nutrition products are the hottest thing on the market right now for dog and horse owners. And Houndsman XP is a dealer. You can find all their products on our website at houndsmanxp.com. Over the past 5 years, you've tuned into this podcast, and I don't take it lightly. We have built a mutual trust. And when I recommend a product, it's because I believe in it, I use it, and I'm given my seal of approval for that. I'm putting my name on that. And with Elite Nutrition products, I do trust it. I do use it. I've seen great results with their essential dogs, their pre and probiotics, their tick-borne disease treatment. It's all natural. It's a great alternative to pharmaceuticals when used appropriately. If you expect extreme performance, you need Elite Nutrition. Available from houndsmanxp.com.
So I'm lollygagging, the wind's howling, I can't hear anything, and I'm kind of walking to go over there, and I look up, and I'm like, she's not in that tree. And then I heard a squeal, and she was in that grass with that jack by herself that I had to find, and it was easy enough once I got close, and I was just like screaming to Dad. I was like, she got it, she actually got it. And but yeah, I'll never forget that.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and this episode was also recorded late last summer as well. I had a chance to sit down with Austin Moates when I went to pick up the Harris's hawk that I had gotten from him, and had a chance to sit down while I was at his house and record this really nice long episode. Talk to him about a bunch of different stuff about, his experience flying Harris's, his propagation project, and all that kind of stuff. And I also got a chance to record a Falconry Follies episode with him as well, which will also be available right around the time that this episode comes out too. So for Extras members, you'll have that to look forward to as well. So anyway, we're just going to go ahead and jump right into this conversation as always with Austin Moates, and hope you enjoy. Here we go. Well, first I want to say, as always, like I do with everybody, thanks for making the time today, and congrats on your new arrival, man.
Thank you. It's been a little bit of a whirlwind the past week or so, but yeah, thank you. I'm honored that you came down here.
I'm excited for you. I remember vaguely at this point, kind of sort of what that first 24 to 48 hours is like, it's
he's been pretty good since we've been home. We've had one rough night, but other than that, fingers crossed that we have more good than bad. But last night was good. But yeah, the night before it was a little rough, but we're adjusting.
Yeah, I remember whenever we did finally get mine home, there was about 48 hours of, I would call it moderate PTSD, at least for me anyway. It's neither here nor there. It's funny though. I mean, I told you guys it's a cliche, but it really is true how quick all that stuff goes by.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, right now we're taking it one day at a time, and one day we'll look back and be like, man, that flew by. But
and it'll be before you know it. I'll go ahead and just pass along the typical cliche saying as well, man. I mean, like I said, mine just got his driver's license beginning of July, and yeah, it's nuts, man. You always think you got this time, and there's always, whatever, and then you'll I don't know, hopefully you won't have as many issues of like recalling dad guilt as I do sometimes. But
I'm sure I will.
I think all parents do. I think it's just kind of that normal feeling to some degree. But anyway, yeah, and thanks for having me down. I'm glad to get back to having my own immature, new fresh Harris again. And yeah. Well, let's go ahead and start kind of talking on that kind of train of thought to start with here, because I know for me, the last couple of Harrises that I've flown have been secondhand birds, and I'm not going to ever do that again.
Yeah, I understand.
What have been your thoughts like on it? I mean, you've got your propagation, your breeding project, and you've flown lots of Harrises now and stuff. Let's start off by talking with some of your experiences with flying and acquiring secondhand birds.
Yeah, so I've not flown too many secondhand birds. I know we were talking a little bit earlier, but secondhand birds, in my opinion, are always kind of a gamble, because sometimes, and not saying anything against other falconers, but they might have kind of instilled behavioral issues that's really hard to go back and fix. Or they might have hunted in a certain style that, you try to adjust. Like, for example, one secondhand bird that I flew, she was like a 5 or 6 year old female from a good friend, but they hunted off T-perches all the time. And I hunt off T-perches to an extent, but we live in the middle of the mountains. A lot of the places we hunt are out of trees or in woods, or at least partially wooded areas. And she had like the hardest time adjusting to going in trees, because she was so used to that T-perch. If I got the T-perch out, she was fine, but it wasn't always advantageous to wherever we were hunting. So yeah, and then we talked about the dog thing. So like if you're planning on flying them with dogs, that's always going to be a gamble. Did the falconer beforehand fly them or socialize them with dogs or with other birds? That's another very common thing that I see is people will get a bird and then try to just throw it in the mix with another bird, whether it be their own or whether it be a friend's bird, and because people just have this mentality that, oh, Harris hawks are social, so they're all going to get along and everything's going to be great. But they're very individuals. They're individuals in the fact that they're kind of like people. Some are more social than others. It's all about kind of how they're raised and how they're introduced to others. So yeah, the secondhand thing, it's not definitely, I'm not saying that I'm against it or anything, but just kind of do your research on the bird, know what you're getting yourself into. And some falconers, as you, I'm sure and have seen, kind of like that challenge idea. They're attracted to it, to where they're like, oh, I want to fix this problem. And I'm not one of those. I'm the type that's like, oh, forget this. I don't have time. Me and my dad, he's kind of my partner in crime, and we hunt and do a lot of this stuff together. We have this saying that's like, why would I try to polish a rhinestone into a diamond? I can just go get a diamond, but yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on the secondhand birds. And sadly, there's a lot of them floating out there that's not too grand, that has their slew of issues, and they're advertised. I've got this free Harris hawk, or maybe it's really cheap, and oh, it's fine, I just don't have time for it. You really need to dig before you open up that can of worms.
Yeah, and we're totally on the same page with all of that, I think, then, because, well, and I'll actually go the extra step past what you said and just say I am against it. For me, I'm against it.
Yeah. Oh, hey, I've been there, done that. Yeah, I won't be doing it again either.
No, I just and even talking to like Tom and Jen and other people, I mean, they agree a lot of times that, once again, always going back to juice versus squeeze and all of that. It's like the couple that I've flown have either flown in such a narrow weight window for me, or just have, like you said, those little quirks that, like, yeah, if someone really wanted to dedicate that degree of time to try and work through them, sure, maybe, they could. But I'm like you. Life's too short, and I would much rather just go ahead and spend the money, or even, I keep hearing all these great things about passage harrises too, and I don't know if you've ever tried one yet. But
I have not. All the information I have about passage harrises comes from secondhand information from other falconers. Yeah. Maybe one day down the pike that might be something I'd want to try, but. Again, I'm kind of one of the people that if it's not broken, let's not try fixing it kind of deal. But I mean, yeah, if the situation worked out, I think it would be fine. But I think that training a passage harris would be very different than training a captive bred bird, because and again, this might not be a popular opinion, and this is just mine. A captive bred harris is kind of this middle ground between flying like a passage bird, a passage red tail, and like an imprint, because there's so many of these little behavioral things you really got to watch out for. And talking about mistakes, training my first couple of harrises, I figured that out fast. I've read it and talked to people beforehand, and then doing it, I can really distinctively remember the first it was a female Harris hawk that I flew, and I made a few mistakes. Thankfully, we got them fixed. But I learned really fast. So you have to always tell people, when they call and they want a bird, and sometimes they'll sit and chat and ask questions. And most people, I would say, like probably at 80% at least, are coming off of a first, couple of red tails or whatever. Maybe they've flown a kestrel. And I just tell them, you can get away with things with a red tail that you won't be able to get away with these birds. They're so smart. The majority of them are, and they're so quick to pick up on things that they will train you if you don't watch it. That's kind of my 2 cents there.
Yeah, and especially with a secondhand bird, well, and I will just say, so the first secondhand bird that I flew ended up being substantially older than what I thought she was also, which was
makes a difference.
Even worse.
Yeah.
Like I thought I was getting like a 10 to 12-year-old bird, ended up being like a 19-year-old bird.
Oof.
And it was tough.
Yeah. 10 to 12 would be tough for me.
Well, and all you ever hear is, well, I don't know how in the hell you lose a Harris. Well, guess what? I lost a Harris one time.
Yeah.
It was that bird. Lost her for 2 weeks. Oh. And, she fooled me. Learning how to read somebody else's 19-year-old secondhand bird that you're getting is way different. It's different, but it's not. It's different. It's different. That's all I'll say. I mean, you're looking at the same things, but they exhibit differently, than what you're used to kind of seeing, And
when by the time they're 19 years old, those habits and things they've picked up are so hard. I mean, can you teach an old dog new tricks? Sometimes, but it's like I said, it's so they're so individualistic that it's hard to gauge beforehand, But it's 10 to 12 would have been a lot for me. I thought the 5 or 6 that I had out here, the 5 or 6-year-old female was pushing it. But I've only flown. I'm sitting here trying to think. I think I've flown 3 secondhand birds, and the main reason why. Actually, the main reason I've flown all of them was simply because was trying to build up a breeding program, and I think that's something you would find, and especially even with Tom and Jen, is when you're looking at lines and you're trying to put pairs together and all that kind of stuff. It takes a while to build, and I've tried my best. It's not been perfect to fly either. If it's secondhand, I wanted to fly them for a season before I kind of decided, do I want to put them up and try breeding them? And out of those 3, I had a male, that was like probably the best male that I've flown. But he was really, he was hunted. He was flown by Falconry out west. He was out west. He taught plenty of jacks and cottontails and some quail, and then he came here and he just he meshed right with our group. I think we were flying that year. We were flying 4 birds when he came in. No, we were flying 5. We were actually flying 5, 4 females, or let me think, 3 females, 2 males, and 1 young male, and then him. And so flying the 2 males was an experience, and I didn't fly them together much, but he was a very good bird. And then the other 2, one other male I flew just the past couple of seasons. He was decent, but I ended up not breeding him. And then the female I was talking about that I ended up not breeding either because she wouldn't mesh with the T-perches. She wouldn't mesh with the dog. She had great bloodlines, but I had enough on my plate at the time too, to where I just said, well, we'll let somebody else tackle that one. But yeah, that otherwise, they've all been captive bred first year that either I've bred or got from somebody else. So
yeah, I just, like I said, I basically, I juice and squeeze. I ended up transferring that bird off in the off season following, and after I got that bird back from the local rehab place that got a call on her, I ended up getting her weight back up again and completely changing my approach with her, and was able to take a few head of game with her by the end of the season. But there was only about 3 to 4 weeks left of the season by that point. And yeah, I mean, I know what my preference is for sure. I would either prefer to start with, nature's nature's scratch, and like the Passage is the only type of Harris that I haven't flown yet.
Yeah.
So like, that's still on the bucket list sometime down the road, but I would either rather go that route or just make my own issues.
Yeah,
one way or the other with the
the
captive breds. So
I understand 100%.
Yeah. And so I mean, as far as that goes, like I said, it sounds like we're on the same page with all that then. But yeah, I just I don't know, man. I don't know how soon I'll try the Passage route, but a trip to Arizona or Texas, I'm sure is in the cards for that at some point.
Oh yeah, and like I said, I definitely wouldn't say no to it. I'd definitely be kind of curious to see how a Passage bird would respond. Like, for me, I'm flying 4 or 5 birds every season, so going and pulling one and training it and seeing the differences in their behavior and your approach of how you would train them. And then what I would be very curious to see is just kind of how they adapt and how they mesh to because my luck, I would go to Arizona and get this bird, and I'd probably trap the Lone Star out there and bring him back, and boom, he wouldn't mesh with mine. And I've got one, but again, I think it's just one of those things that you wouldn't know. And thinking on that, of course, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking on going out there and trapping. I would definitely probably, if you're going to fly them socially, try to find a group. I'd be a little more iffy about trapping one off by itself, because there are some Harris hawks in the wild that don't really ever fit in, and they kind of do their own thing. And in captivity, there's occasionally one that will come out that will kind of be screwed up, that won't want to do their own thing. But yeah, maybe one day. Never say never. Yeah.
I think it just it might be a little bit further drive, but due to the permit costs and everything else, and just people I know and whatever. I mean, I know a lot of people in Texas now and Arizona, but I think Arizona's got a special place in my heart. I think I'd rather go there to try.
If it ever comes down to where I'm driving to Arizona, I hope that it's to hunt. That's probably my goal. Is I would love to be able to go out there and hunt antelope jacks at some point. That's one of my bucket list items. But that won't be in the near immediate future. But one day I would like to do that. So right now I'd like to catch. I've caught plenty of black-tailed jacks, and I'd like to catch at least a couple of whitetails and an antelope, just to say one day, by the time that I have to hang up the glove and sit down, I can say, well, I've done it. But I mean, we live on the other side of the country, and so I always look forward to our jack hawking trips, but it is a job to get one planned, and getting somebody to feed all the birds and to drive out there. But yeah, I always look forward to it. But if I'm going back to where we were, if I'm going to Arizona, that's what I'm probably going for.
Yeah. Well, and who knows? Sometimes maybe you can, every so often the stars align to where you can get, well, pun intended, multiple birds with one stone.
Yeah. I've seen that.
You never know. But.
I've seen that. Yeah. So hey, maybe that'd be a tag team here. There's 3 on the trap. Pick one.
Exactly.
But
exactly. But I've heard from multiple people though, as far as the whole meshing thing. I've heard from multiple people that have flown the Passages though, is that the one thing you don't have to worry about is them meshing with other birds because they're so used to it in the wild.
Yeah, maybe so.
I don't know.
I've heard of so one friend of mine. I'm trying to think. It's been a little while. They flew a passage, and again, this was a few years back, and I think their experience, and it was a male, if I'm remembering correctly. It was fearful of their group. They were only flying with like 2 other birds. They were adding in a third one. And I think he constantly flew out of the field. And I honestly don't remember how that issue got resolved. All I remembered is that they were constantly kind of battling him. You know, he would initially, when you let him out of the box, I think, and you kind of got moving, he'd stay around for a few minutes on the forefront, and then I don't know what would spook him, and he would bolt. So, but yeah, I mean, it would. To me, I can't see any issue with, especially, you know, if you're trapping one and you're bringing them back, and you've got birds to socialize them with, it probably would be no issue whatsoever. But a lot of people, like I said earlier, you know, they get a Harris hawk and they just think, oh, well, I can just throw it up with another Harris hawk. I think there's even with, you know, like out here, I've always got birds, you know, you can see my facility. It's designed pretty much so everybody can kind of see everybody. I always, when I'm flying a new bird, I always try to acclimate it, and we always test the waters. I'll have Jen come out here and you know, I'll toss one up. Initially, you know, I'll have one, and I'll call it to the glove, and she'll hold one bird, and it'll kind of watch, and then we switch places and toss them up in a tree and have them follow. So we try not to ever just go out in the field the first time and just be like, here, you know, throw up. And they're always tied out with each other and everything. So I do try to make it a point to socialize, you know, no matter what it would be. So if I was going to go get a passage bird, I'd probably do the same process, you know, tying them out, doing some trial runs here in the yard and seeing how they interact, how they follow, because I'd much rather, if anything went wrong, it be back here than it would be, you know, when I'm 45 minutes away.
Sure. Yeah. I've seen kind of just the basic interactions between Harrises. It's like most of the time you see an issue pretty quickly, you know, like, and I'm sure you've noticed this too. I mean, but like usually you can tell really fast if 2 birds aren't really gonna, it doesn't take very long at all for them to start crabbing and fighting with each other, whatever. But that being said, I mean, there's been a couple of times too, you know, just personal experience too with the bird that I flew. Well, it was the one I was just talking about, actually. You know, flying with a friend's bird. They were flying great together, perfectly for 45 minutes. And then all of a sudden, she just decided to go and hammer him, like, you know, and it's just like, why?
A lot of it, I think, is hormone driven, and then I would be, you know, like, what time of year did that kind of start happening? Because I've flown females and I've got one right now who she can kind of be a pain in the ass toward the end of the season, because as soon as the weather starts getting warmer, she's like, I think that she'll be 8 this year. And for some reason she likes to kind of start being a butt, you know, nothing major, but just enough to be obnoxious. And then, you know, just their interactions, like, you know, interacting with juveniles and adults. And cause that's one thing that usually if there's going to be, and it's not really crabbing, but, and it's not happened. It's might have happened twice. Most of the young birds that I've flown, now I've not flown like a plethora of, you know, 50 Harris hawks or something like that. But I think this one that I've got out here is number that I've trained like from the beginning, not counting the secondhand birds. I think this is like number 13 or something. And they want a food bag sometimes, and I, you know, they'll go up there if they see an adult. But doing all this stuff on the forefront in the backyard, like I said, kind of testing the waters. Usually you can get around it and you'll see if it's going to happen, but that can really tick some adults off if they want to go up and ask for food. There's some that just will fly away, and there's some that will not take it. But, you know, just always kind of, like I said, testing the waters, seeing how they're going to act, keeping them around each other. And they're tied out. They're not free lofted during the hunting season. Right now, they're all free lofted together. And I think that is a crucial, that right there is very important, is to molt hawks together when they're hog fat. You know, obviously I don't like free lofting them. I know some people do, and they'll put them in mews and all that kind of stuff. But I have seen, it might take a while, but I have seen and heard some horror stories, even with breeding birds. You know, they'll have a breeding pair, and like what'll typically happen is somebody will have a pair that they'll have fat during the spring and summer, breed, and then drop their weight back down during the winter and fly. And that you can get away with that for a couple of years. But there was an individual, and this was a while ago. It was within the last probably 6 or 7 years. You know, they were flying them, and had their, and then he free lofted them year round, which again, this is the issue. Went out there one day during the hunting season, and there all was left was 2 legs of a male, and she had ate the entire thing.
Yeah.
And so just by avoiding that, keeping when they're at weight, keeping them, tied out where they're around each other, but they can't get to one another. And then when you're hunting, like we were talking about, the crabbing and everything, some people will just kind of try to let them work it out. Because I've quit flying with other people. For the first couple of years, it didn't happen a ton, but there's a few falconers in my area that would, well, let's fly our birds together, and it's kind of like, okay. But over the past year or two, it was like, no, I'm not dealing with it anymore, because my 5 get along great, but when you throw in this one female, and then the crabbing is like contagious. It can be like a domino effect. You get one female, so let's say you go out with your buddy, and your birds are fine, and then he throws up his bird, and well, his bird grabs yours and starts crabbing. Okay, well, that could just start a chain event to where now when you go home, that female that got beat up wants to start beating up the other birds, and then so it's easier just to avoid it. To me, I think if you were going to do it, the safest situation would be in a situation maybe like out west where you're hawking off the fist, to where all the birds are contained. They're only kind of loose when there's a kill or when there's a rabbit and you're getting them back. But when you're trying to have them follow you through the trees and you've got strangers and they're sitting up there yakking their head off, at this one they're stomping at each other and all that stuff. So now I just avoid it. Too much trouble for me.
Yeah, and I think a large part of that is because of the whole social aspect. It's like they learn all these, like you said, these habits from each other. And I mean, like the first Harris I ever flew was dead quiet. Mm-hmm. Didn't even do the whole croaking thing. None of that, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that bird's sister, my sponsor, bred both of those birds, and that bird was a lot more vocal. Mm-hmm. So when we did start flying the birds together, all of a sudden mine starts becoming more vocal, and I'm like,
there you go. Yep.
Could have done without that.
That's contagious. But that's another contagious thing.
Yeah. So it's all kind of like that. I don't know. Simon Says, "Monkey see, monkey do" with these Harrises, man.
It is, and there's, like I said, they're so highly individual, and even you can have there's obviously things you can do to try to lessen the likelihood of like having a screamer or something like that, but there are some birds that just due to their like genetic nature and their tame, the tamer they are, sometimes the more vocal they want to be, just because they're not afraid to let themselves be known, like, hey, feed me, or hey, I see you. I had one, and this was when I was making the mistake on the first bird that we can get into later, but she was so bad, and I've never had another one like this, thank goodness, that like when you would turn the bathroom light on to get ready to go to school or work in the morning, she knew it and would start the screaming.
Oh man.
So
yeah.
But then the good news about screaming, at least in my experience, is usually after you can get through that first year, at least it gets a little bit less annoying, but they slack up a little bit, and I can deal with, I'm living, you can see where I live. I don't ever worry about it too much. If it's a little bit of screaming every now and then, but as long as they're not screaming in the field, and thankfully we don't have to deal with that too much.
Yeah. Well, and the one imprint that I flew, it was literally the worst screaming bird that I've ever had in my entire life.
I cannot even imagine.
Oh my God. And you just mentioned like the whole social cue thing, right? Where if it knew another person was around or whatever, like I could be, I don't know, 15, 20 yards away from that thing's mew, right?
Yeah.
And as soon as it heard the faintest little indication that there were footsteps walking anywhere within that mew, it'd be dead silent. But then it would hear that and instantly it's rah, rah, whatever. And most people that have been in falconry for 5 minutes have heard a Harris vocalize, right? To some degree. But this was like way past any kind of normal like Harris vocalization. It was way more annoying, way more obnoxious. Yeah. And that bird would not stop at all whatsoever.
I can imagine an imprint you could not pay me any amount of money to try to fly an imprint Harris hawk, because I cannot imagine. Is that the bird that caught the coyote?
Yeah,
that's the brave one. Yeah, that's the telltale sign of an imprint. No fear at all. I've had some captive breds. I've had one female, she chased a coyote down. We were hunting beside some railroad tracks, and we flushed it, and she chased it but peeled off. And we've caught, we almost caught a fox one time, and so they can be a little bit ballsy. We've caught, sad to say, a couple of cats and other not so fun things. But yeah, no, I couldn't do an imprint. I don't think it would be it would not be up my alley. An imprint Harris.
Yeah. No, and it wasn't up mine either. The only reason, I was flying it for a friend. You know the story. But anyway, yeah. So that never again, as far as that goes either, for me. But yeah, I just. The ironic thing about that bird, though, was that was the one bird that I absolutely knew 1,000,000% sure, though, when his head was in the game, when he wanted to hunt, he did shut up.
Oh, I bet.
And that was the only time, though, that he would shut up, was whenever he actually was really in full-on hunt mode. Mm-hmm. Any other time, if he was still squawking in the field, I knew that he was just being an ass, and it wasn't.
And that's what most of them, if they're out there yakking and or screaming or whatever, it means they're not paying attention to the hunt. When you're first getting them out of the box, and we try to move real quick, of course, and where they have on backpacks and everything, so we can just turn their backpacks on, take off their hookups, and they're gone. But if they yak a little bit, then especially a young bird, the adults don't really do it. But if it wants to scream something, that's one thing. But if it's following you through the woods or following you through the field, then it's just that bird's it's not focused. It needs some motivation. It needs a little bit. Probably of a weight drop or whatever, but yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like I said, it's funny. I don't think this particular species, gets all the credit in the world for a lot of the wrong things. I think. And I think that's really unfortunate.
It really is unfortunate. Just because. I was thinking on this morning, actually, when I was thinking about maybe what we would be talking about on here, and there's so many people that fly Harris Hawks, but there's so few people that really seems to get the tap into their full potential, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Even really good falconers. I can think of a couple of falconers right now off the top of my head that are great falconers, and they catch a ton of game, but then when it comes down to flying a Harris Hawk, it's just and then they have the worst things to say about it. You could be around me and Jeff Fincher at a meet, and we sit there at night, and I think at the last meet we were sitting there after dinner or whatever, and he was like, we should do one of those podcasts where we just sit and debate on Harris Hawks versus red tails and da. But it's just, you can't train them. You just cannot train them like a red tail, and you have to have a different approach. And if you go in, kind of my philosophy is, if a lot of people get them and they already in their mind deem them like as a second class bird, so then they don't try to get them to reach their full potential. So if you have that mindset that's like, well, this is a stupid Harris Hawk, what in the world am I going to do with this? We're going to go out and catch nothing, or it's going to go out and catch a some lone tennis ball or something thrown out in the field, or a cup, and all this crazy. That's what I'll see all the time. They'll post a picture with their Harris Hawk on like a styrofoam food container, and they're like, these stupid Harris Hawks, and it's just like, well, but yeah, you really have to kind of pour into them. And I think where you can really untap that potential is definitely in that social aspect, because that's what they can really bring to the table, is flying more than one bird, flying them together, regularly, so that they're socialized, they know each other. And you're talking about cues, once you fly them enough, they take cues from each other. They know, like, for example, out in our group right now, I've got one bird in particular that has like crazy eyesight. She can spot game first, better than any of the other ones, and they know right now, if this hawk, if Bree flies, they are on her butt. Now, it might not be a good thing if it's not game, if it's something that's just piqued her interest, but most of the time she's pretty dead on. But yeah, just going in, I definitely think that they're kind of viewed as second class birds, and falconers that fly them, they're kind of like, oh, well, they just fly Harris Hawks, and it's like, well, they're a little bit more complex than what people give them credit for, and highly versatile. Here in East Tennessee, to me, it's red tails are awesome. I've flown several red tails. Kestrels are awesome. I've just recently got to fly a kestrel, and it definitely will not be my last. I've had a blast. but for a Harris hawk, you've got rabbits, you've got squirrels. I know, come kill me over here, right? So that's highly controversial sometimes. But you got rabbits, you got squirrels, birds, you've got crows, you've got all sorts of different things. And then you can travel and just keeping them. You can hunt them from the trees, you can hunt them off the T-perch, you can hunt them off the fish, you can throw them out the window, whatever your gist is. They can pretty well do it. So that's one of the things I think that keeps me really. I've always been intrigued and drawn to the Harris hawks, even from when I first got started in falconry. But really being able to dive in and kind of play with their versatility and that social nature has been what keeps me going with them.
For sure, yeah. And I I make the joke often that all of my best memories, or a lot of my best memories so far, have been with a Harris hawk. Mm-hmm. And pretty much all of my worst memories so far have been with a Harris hawk. It's just, they're a very unique species. Yes. And, they're like a lot of other species too. You're either going to love them or hate them. Mm-hmm. And and like what you said, I mean, there's not been very many other people that I've seen, for the most part, that have flown them, I think, to the way they could be flown, like you were saying, kind of at that utmost potential level. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people that, unfortunately, I think, and I don't know if I'll get any pushback for this, I don't think this is a very controversial statement to make. It's just kind of factual, at least from my point of view. There's a lot of people that only fly them to low or half potential because mm-hmm. they know they can, and they can get away with it mm-hmm. in a lot of ways too. They're a bird that are very user friendly mm-hmm. in a lot of ways, obviously, or else they wouldn't be the most, other than red tails, I think, widely flown species. Mm-hmm. I don't know, maybe I'm off on that, but I mean, I what are you going to see flown most often around the country? You're going to see mostly Harrises and red tails. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah.
But I think that there's only been a handful of other people that I've really seen fly them and fly them, and they've just been like really super ultra efficient and did what they were supposed to do, like literally every single time they were flown, and and I think there's a lot to be said for that. And if you can get a very intelligent species like that to do that, that means you're doing, in my mind, all the things right that you're supposed to be doing. You're flying them often, mm-hmm. and you're catching game, and you're not instilling any other weird, bad, quirky habits in them either. Mm-hmm.
I mean, and kind of piggybacking off that, I mean, to me, for me, the purpose of falconry is catching game. Mm-hmm. You're going out, you're catching game, and I mean, if you want a species, that'll do it. Not that there aren't plenty of others, obviously, like I said, but Harris hawks, once you get, I mean, they can be very consistent, and when you go out, it's usually, and again, this comes back to a lot of different things with any bird. It doesn't matter whether it's a goshawk, whether it's a red tail, whether it's a sharpshin or whatever, or a Harris hawk. None of it, no matter what you do, it's kind of all for nothing if you don't have fields with plenty of game, and you're going out and you're hunting, as much as you possibly can. Because just talking about like the behavioral things, and this is one of the reasons, that Harris hawks do have problems, is you have them, and like I said, they're kind of those they're second class birds, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and they'll have some other bird that they're flying, and they might go out and hunt the Harris hawk one day a week, or it might be 2 days a week, and then they go out and they might have those behavioral issues. But I'll tell you right now, if you want to get rid of some behavioral issues, you hunt the crap mm-hmm. out of those birds. If you just go, hunt 10 days in a row, I'll never, Tom Colson said that, and it kind of stuck with me. If you hawk 10 days in a row, that's like a month's worth of hawking right there that can really kind of really shave down any issues that a bird will have for anything. So getting out there and doing that, to me, that's what it's about. It always kind of upsets me to see falconers with birds that they don't hunt, or they hunt when it's convenient to them, and I mean, so there's my soapbox.
Yeah. Sorry. No, man, it's a good soapbox to stand on, and that's part of the reason why I enjoy continuing to do this podcast so much is because there's certain themes that you want. I've said it a million times on here. You got to hammer home constantly and remind people that might be listening to this that are thinking about getting into it or whatever. Like the whole point is hunting.
Yep.
And if you're not able to do that consistently, then you're defeating the purpose.
Yep.
And you're not going to be happy with the result, and neither is the bird.
Mm-mm.
And but yeah, I mean, the whole 10-day thing, I mean, that's perfect because, I mean, by the end of that almost 2 weeks, you've established a completely different routine.
Yeah.
You've wired things differently again.
And I mean, they expect it. Like for me, like I said, I teach, and it's a fairly good schedule to be a falconer because I get off around 3 o'clock every day, 3:15, and when I'm ready to go, I have my change of clothes, my tidbits are chopped, my boots are ready, and I know who I'm flying, and so it's about the same time every day. They're going out, they're expecting it, they know they're ready to go, and we'll go out, we hunt for about an hour. During the winter time, December can be rough because daylight is few and far between, but yeah, we'll go out and hunt and come home, and obviously there are days where you have other responsibilities or the weather's horrible for a week or whatever. But yeah, I really make it a goal to get out, and I'm proud to say that I do get out. At least 4 to 7 days a week. So I'd say now there's obviously some weeks that's maybe a 3-day or whatever. If you got parent teacher conference or now obviously I've got a kid that will shave down a little bit of time. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I think that so many falconers, they come with issues or they'll call with problems, and it's kind of simple to just say, if you take the time, and this is another thing, going kind of back on the soapbox, is yeah, you got to have game, yeah, you have to hunt, but like you're wasting your time if you're hunting in places that has no game or has very little game. So spending the time to scout and go out and ask for permission, and all that kind of stuff, it's very important and will really set you up. Because we joke about, there's some falconers that they will hunt in a Walmart parking lot if they've got permission to do it, and they'll walk around for 2 hours with a bird, and it's like, what are you doing? You're this is stupid. You're wasting your time. Go out and just try to find spots. But yeah, I think that's something that my dad and I, and again, I grew up in a hunting household. My whole family hunted. My dad, my grandfather, my uncles, all that stuff. So I grew up in the back of a truck going. They deer hunted a lot, and they duck hunted, and so I was always after school kind of having to throw my bag in the back of the truck, and we were going out scouting or we were going to go find this. So when it kind of switched over to falconry, and we started, we brought the dogs into the mix. We started looking for rabbits, and we had we have squirrel spots too from red tails when we were finding those, and now even with the Harrises. It just kind of naturally progressed to where I knew, because I can distinctly remember one of the first couple of hunts that I had. There was this one set of woods. I was flying a male red tail, and I loved it because there were squirrels, and it was easy for me to drive to. I just got my driver's license, and I'm driving over there, and my dad was with me, and he was like, "You cannot keep hunting the same spot." He's like, "You just can't." He said, "This is going to run out or it's going to disappear. You better find somewhere else." And after that, I've never forgot it. And we take the time now, and I'm very lucky too. I will admit that I can cheat a little bit. My dad, he worked for the utility company. So his whole, every day is just spent on the roads. So he is constantly, he doesn't do it so much anymore, but he used to carry a notebook with him, and he would be jotting down addresses, and we would go and scout them out. But yeah, he has kind of been my secret weapon with being successful in falconry.
It's cool. Yeah, you're a cheater.
Yeah, I'm a cheater.
You slacker, you.
Oh man. Hey, but when we go out west, there's no cheating there. That's fresh. That's fresh ground that we just have to hit the roads and jump fences and look for sign and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I will. I get to cheat a little bit.
Yeah. So you were pretty young when you got into this then, huh?
Yeah, I started. So I couldn't even get my license when I first kind of got involved with other falconers in the area. I was only 12. And so I stuck around for 2 years We're just hanging out, bugging the absolute crap out of them, and calling every weekend. It used to be so. The group that I kind of got started with doesn't do so much falconry now, but they would meet every weekend almost up in Cleveland, which is about 45 minutes away. And I mean, I was ready to roll. I mean, we went out and I, like I said, I bugged them to death, and I hung out. And my dad, you know, kind of getting started into it. It's a funny story that several of our friends have heard. I begged to go see falconry. You know, he was obviously like, "What is falconry?" And I had to explain it. And he's like, "Yeah, you'll never find anybody that does that." And I was already ready for him. I was like, "Oh, I found people," and they're in Cleveland. He was like, "Okay. Well, anyway, like I said earlier, he was always a big sportsman, and he was actually going duck hunting. This was on a Saturday, and I hunted, and like I said, I kind of got drug around with them some, you know, when they were scouting and going places. But I, you know, killed a deer, and I went and I liked dove hunting a little bit, but it wasn't my forte. But he said, "Okay, I'll make you a deal." And then, you know, to like a 12-year-old kid, to getting up at like 4 o'clock in the morning is not too fun. He said, "If you will get up and go duck hunting with me, we'll go see what falconry is about after I'm done duck hunting." So I load up at like whatever, you know, butt crack. It was dark. Take all my little Audubon field guides and bird books, you know, like a little geek, and I'm sitting in the front seat, and he was like, "Do you want to go sit in the blind with me?" So I said no. So I sat in the truck for hours, you know, until like 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, or whatever. And you know, they came back and cleaned the ducks, and we grabbed something, and then we went out and we caught like 3 or 4 rats. They caught, I shouldn't say we, I was not part, I was just a spectator. But and with hair socks, they caught, you know, 4 rabbits, which is a pretty good day here in East Tennessee, because we're not just rabbit heavy. But yeah, and maybe that's why I'm stuck with hair socks. They caught the most game on the forefront. But yeah, and after that, and then he thought, you know, I was 12 and I had to be 14 to get my license, so he was just kind of like, no, he'll forget about this in 2 years, and I did not forget about it.
Yeah, you're one of the rare young ones that stuck with it. But I mean, well, and that's something else that you can't hammer home enough too. You did what most people are supposed to do anyway. Uh-huh. And in my humble opinion, this is one of those opinions that I'll keep interjecting freely with no problem, because I did it. Like, I think that everybody at a minimum should spectate at least a full season.
Me too. I agree 100%.
Minimum.
Uh-huh.
And the reason for that, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. I think there's a lot of people, and sometimes it works out, and people become great falconers and are very hardcore about it with very little pre-exposure. But I think those are more of the exceptions to the rule in a lot of ways. I think that a lot of people would highly benefit from a full season of spectating, just so they can fully 100% understand, you know, what's up with it.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. And that's what and people don't want to hear that. They and this has changed just since I've done it. But, you know, I think when I initially kind of started trying to find those falconers, you know, obviously Facebook was around. This was like whatever it was, 2011, maybe, something like that. So, you know, obviously Facebook was around, but I think the group had like 30 people in it or something, you know, and then half of them didn't have hawks. So it was so small. And now we've got, you know, hundreds of people in here. So it's all the time, you know, people are just like, what do you see when you get on Facebook? I need a sponsor and I'm living here, you know, or I've done past my test, I need a sponsor. Uh-huh. And it's kind of like, okay, you're jumping the gun, and they don't understand. There's been a couple of people just since I've been the president, you know, of the Tennessee club, and kind of got that back up and running and dealt with all that crap, but that's a different story. But people will kind of get defensive about it. There was one individual, and again, you know, when I came into it, I just felt like it was a little bit different. You didn't have all this access to what people have now, and you know, contacting falconers. But yeah, there was this one individual, and this lady got on there and wanted a sponsor, and you know, they said, somebody, I don't remember who, said exactly what you said. You know, well, you need to go out, you need to hawk. Well, it turned out she was like handicapped, and you know, that's horrible. But when you sit down and think about it, are you really going to be able to do falconry? And she actually went on this huge rant about like wanting to be a virtual falconer. You know, she wanted a virtual sponsor. She wanted to do virtual falconry. And you're just thinking, what? Have you read or looked at anything? But people are getting crazier and crazier by the day. Yeah. And the internet is great. I think it's a double-edged sword, though. I think, you're opening up doors to it's horrible, but there's some people that shouldn't be falconers, period. And that might not be a popular opinion. And I know everybody should have access to do things. And I'm not trying to say that, promote any form of gatekeeping or anything, but there are just some people that are not meant to be falconers. I have sponsored one individual, and I've told people no, because to me, if you go out with somebody and I'll tell them, they'll ask, when you're going hunting, I'll tell them when they're going hunting, and after that, if you flake out on me a couple of times, then you're already kind of sinking your own ship. And there's one individual I'm thinking of right now that, he really struggled kind of getting into falconry, and we helped him, and he went with us a couple of times. And then it came down to where, somehow at that time I was crazy. I didn't sponsor him, and he got a sponsor. And then it came down to like trapping, and he needed help trapping, and his sponsor lived nowhere near him. And he'd say, can you help me? Can you help me? And we'd try to go trap, and then they'd flake and never show up, and it's just like, what are you doing? What are you trying to build here? So to me, if you're out there listening and you want to get into falconry, like we've said, I think the commitment, if you show your commitment and hard work, and they're really, I know you might feel like, but there's really not any dumb questions, especially when you're coming in. I would rather somebody ask me 50 million simple questions that we can answer or whatever than, and just have them learn and to be a kind of a sponge. Than to sit there and you're looking at it and you're talking to them and you can see it go in one ear and go out the other. So anyway.
Yeah, no, I'm I guess I might be an exception to the rule too. I do think that there's definitely some dumb questions, but in something that's niche like this that people aren't really that educated on to begin with, I agree with you. I do think that dumb questions exist, not just so much for this initially, at least. I think they exist. Maybe it's the teacher aspect in me to get people to talk up. But if you come and ask me, can my hawk eat scrambled eggs on the first, or something stupid, then yeah, that's a dumb question. But I think they start getting dumber the more years you've been in this, and you say, when they lead that with I'm a master falconer, and then dumb questions. But when you're getting into it, don't be afraid to ask somebody questions. And I think, kind of going back to hawking with people for a full season, hawk with different people and try to kind of field your options there. Well, yeah. And I agree with that too, because a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on finding someone that's right for you to teach you also. Right. Yeah. Because not all personalities are meant for each other.
No, and no, they're definitely not. I think a lot of people, and I get it because they work hard and they get impatient, and you finally find somebody that kind of gives you like this hint that they would sponsor you. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a great falconer or somebody that you want to learn from, but then they kind of suck to them and they stay with them. So I think by going out and these field meets and picnics, there's so many opportunities now for people to be able to go and to go with other falconers and see what they're doing. And one thing that I am a big advocate of, that not everybody agrees with, is I think your proximity to your sponsor is extremely important. I wouldn't sponsor somebody that lives more than 45 minutes to an hour away, because I want to be able to get in the field with them on a regular basis. And even if I hawk all week long, obviously, and they might, but even if it's just a couple days a week, I get to go with them. And I think that's where you form a relationship and you really learn a lot, because I was so thankful for my sponsor. He was by my side, and it wasn't it wasn't like anything forced. It was just, you want to go hunt Saturday? And he's like, yeah, let's go hunt, and it just kind of developed into this relationship that we've still got today. And I think that's so important. And just if something does go wrong, having somebody to call that, talking on the phone is one thing, but going and just saying, let me see what's going on, or what are you doing? And something so simple as like, your bird's ready to fly free, and you just want to say, do you think she's ready to go? And you can just pop over and look and go, yeah, she looks good. Let's go try her. But, this paper sponsor kind of deal, can be dangerous.
Yeah.
It can just be dangerous. And I'm seeing like I said, with the internet and with Facebook, I think I'm seeing a little bit more of it now than what I initially did when I first got into falconry.
Sure. Yeah, no, for sure. And my sponsor, I was lucky. You know, he was only 10, 15 minutes from me, and you know, just right down the road, basically. And while admittedly, I don't think he would dispute this either. Admittedly, there were some personality things that didn't mesh between he and I. We always got along okay for the most part and everything, but we're very different personalities, you know, in a lot of ways. You know, I think that's very important because you're going to be basically glued to somebody.
You are,
you know, for at least the majority of your first season, and you need to really vet people. Like, they're vetting you, but you're also vetting them.
Yes.
And that's okay. And that's fine.
It holds some accountability on both parts. You know, you're going out and, you know, you're representing the person sponsoring you. And I mean, I agree 100%.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like I said, it's one of those deals you can't overstate the importance of all that. I don't really personally agree with the paper sponsor stuff either. I think, like you said, that's one of the things that if there was a way at some point to revise some kind of regulations or with our rules and stuff like that, with the way our system works, that would be one thing that I would immediately vote for change personally. I don't like to interject my opinions too much with this kind of stuff.
Well, I know that it is. I mean, like, so in just here in Tennessee, you know, we have this kind of big, kind of dense I shouldn't say dense. It's not like there's a lot, but we have more falconers on the eastern side of the state and in the middle Tennessee than we do in West Tennessee. And so it does provide a disadvantage for somebody that, you know, out in West Tennessee that wants to get started, not only just to find a sponsor, but to find a falconer, period.
Sure.
So, I mean, I understand that, but at the same time, you know, it is what it is. I mean,
where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
If you want it bad enough, you'll figure out a way to make it work.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. And I'm not ever, and like I said, there's exceptions to pretty much everything. Maybe you've got an individual that's very, very responsible and very, you know, they're go-getting, you have a go-getter attitude, and maybe you're okay to be a little bit more hands-off, you know, and they can do a little bit more. But again, I think it's totally comes down to the person sponsoring, you know, this individual, and then the individual themselves that's getting started. So a lot of responsibility comes down to the sponsors and people doing it. And you know it. I mean, there's the same, and again, you get accused of gatekeeping a lot of people. This kind of sport's accused of it because, you know, people went into it and they can't find a sponsor and yada yada yada. But you kind of got these same people sponsoring the majority of falconers coming in, and you start seeing patterns, and you're like, you know, this isn't a good thing. I'm starting to see something certain showing up, and but I think that, sponsorship is kind of a tricky situation sometimes.
Yeah, and I've never sponsored anybody yet, and I told myself I would not until I knew that I was going to be able to give someone the attention that I would expect out of them. You know, so like I'm not the type of person that would ever expect anyone to do anything that I didn't do myself. And that whole first season, I was getting out a minimum of 3 to 4 times a week also, you know, and I've tried to make that, if I can't get out 3 to 4 times a week personally, I'm just not doing falconry.
Yeah,
that's my
it.
personal standard. I've tried to force it before, and it stops being fun.
Yeah.
And that ruins the whole purpose, right? So I knew that until I could, with the way my life worked, I mean, you know how my life is. So like in my work situation, especially the last 4 years, there was no way in hell I'd be able to be in a position to sponsor somebody by those standards. But now that I'm back home and working at home again full time and plan to get back to my own personal standards that way, I would be potentially open to it, but someone would have to show me that they're willing to put in that much effort, you know, and I, like I said, I wouldn't expect that out of somebody if I hadn't done it myself.
I mean, like I said, I've only sponsored one, and this is going into year, what is it? this is year 11, so we'll be going on year 12 soon. But I've sponsored one individual, and again, the only reason really that I did is he was very dedicated. He asked tons of great questions. He went with us. He had the perfect schedule for falconry because so he and his wife, she actually ended up getting into it. Great people. They are like hang glider professionals down here. So down, about 20 minutes down the road, and she's like a world-renowned hang glider person, whatever the term is. But they work mainly on the weekend, so they have like Monday through Friday to hawk, and then the wintertime is their slow season, and so they have pretty much an open schedule, and they get to go out and they hunt all the time. They're great. They did a great job, and they knew like another reason that I thought, well, this was a good choice is he knew his limitations. So like when he got his first bird, he kind of started talking about, you want to release it, you want to find another one, because I'm the type that it's kind of up to them. I'm not going to be like, you release that bird and you're going to train another one. If everything's going good and they want to try to interview it, then I say whatever. But I was asking him, and he knew. He was like, no, this summer is just too much. We travel, our business picks up. I want to make sure that we have it set up to where we don't have a bird in the summer. And I thought, well, you're very smart for being able to come to that realization, and you can't do that. And then when wintertime opens up, he traps a bird and keeps going, and he does great. So kind of minds his own business over there, and that was fantastic.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And you never know where you're going to find certain people that do certain things. That's always funny to me. I've been getting a chance to meet so many people, and there's certain things that I've seen people do for careers you would never expect, and this kind of stuff. But no, and I think that's a big quality that I look for in people too, is like how easily can you be real with yourself? Mm-hmm. Like if you are going to delude yourself into thinking that you can just do whatever, and life's not going to be fair if like this isn't going to work out for you, then that doesn't sit very well for me. Like with me, like I think that you should be very self-aware. And if you're not able to have a real conversation with yourself and have that internal dialogue and come to the appropriate realizations, then you're not ready for something like this. That's just my 2 cents on that also.
I agree 100%.
But, well, man, I do want to, before we start to wrap this part of the conversation up, I mean, we're going to talk about the mistakes and stuff a little bit more in a little bonus episode here after this. But before we start to wrap this up, I do want to, I mean, you brushed over it real quick. I do like getting people's overall experiences and takes on what it's like to serve in some kind of club capacity and things like that. I think this is another thing also that's important for people to hear, the good and the bad, because regardless of whether or not they have a good or bad experience, somebody's got to do these things.
Yes.
And so what has that been like trying to reestablish the club here in Tennessee? And I mean, I already know the answer to this question. It's a rhetorical question, but I want to hear it from you.
Well, it was rough. It was very, very rough. As most people probably, a lot of people, even across the country, have seen, and because we had some stuff in the Hawk Chalks and updates and everything, but legally it's kind of been a battle. So as you know, I came into this position. So a little bit of background before I go into it. The club has been around kind of in stints. So like when I first got started in falconry, there was a Tennessee Falconers Association, and it was very kind of small. We did maybe like a little hodgepodge meet here or there or whatever, or a picnic, and there wasn't a lot of involvement. But then again, there wasn't the same amount of falconers that there are now. And then it kind of dies off. And then finally, we kind of heard some trouble coming down the turnpike. And there was an individual, I'm sure you know, that had some legal actions, put against her to where birds got confiscated and some rights were very wrongfully violated. And that kind of instigated where they were like, okay, we need some sort of official stance in a club again. And then I'm the lucky individual that got chosen for the job. And along with two others, Jeff Wilburn, he's our vice president. Trey Walker was our treasurer, / secretary. Raffle guru. They're both fantastic. And we had a lot of help. And not only that, but so when we came in, all that legal stuff happened, and the reg kind of became the big highlight because Tennessee had some of the kind of most vague regulations you've seen. So, obviously back in, what was it? I think it was 2012, the federal regulations kind of got pushed out and revamped and states started adopting them. And Tennessee, on a very late notice, kind of got some things approved. But their regs were rushed and they were vague. They had all sorts of gray areas, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Like propagation, for example. Since I breed and there's other falconers that breed, there was nothing exclusively written about propagation. So we just always assumed it went to the feds, and that's the rules we followed and who we reported to, obviously. And then you have like abatement, and education and all that kind of stuff. And we were always told, like, for example, this is just one of those gray areas. We were always told here in Tennessee that we couldn't have a falconry permit with an education permit or a rehabilitation permit. And it came down basically to our falconry coordinator at the time just kind of saying, he kind of made that up and executed it and everything. So yeah, we came in, had these really vague regs, and the individual that had all the legal action, put against her, they were trying to use all those gray areas against her. And so our first thing was, not only trying to get a club started, but let's try to get the regs situated. And we formed a committee of some great falconers, kind of across the state, different areas of the state. And we spent many, many, many nights on Zoom calls, going through line by line of regs. And we were constantly going back and forth with, the TWRA, our wildlife agency, and trips to Nashville, trips to commissioner meetings. And I'm proud to say that right now, this might change tomorrow, but right now I think we're kind of seeing light at the end of the tunnel. But yeah, so we were doing that, and then just trying to get members, kind of actually do the fun stuff, the picnics, the meets, and getting involvement from people. But I would say that I'm very, very proud of what we've done with that, and I hope our term's over actually, like now. So we're passing the torch on to some other individuals, but I think we've got a very solid foundation, and I'm hoping this next 2-year term for the club will be a little bit less tumultuous. But yeah, it's rough. So if you want to become any form of officer for any club, do your research and be prepared. And I know I talked a lot about the bad, but there's also a lot of the good. I would say the biggest thing that I have enjoyed about being the president of the club is the relationships and the people I've got to meet, other falconers. I mean, I've got to, it was kind of on bad circumstances in terms of when all the legal stuff blew up. But, I was talking to people from across the country that I had heard about and never really met, who were very, very helpful, and NAFA officials, and then just other falconers in surrounding states and in Tennessee. And then just Jeff and Trey, getting to be closer with those two guys because they're both fantastic people. That would be the relationships and the interaction. And the meets were fun. They're stressful to plan sometimes, but they're the meets are fun. But yeah, so just I guess that's my experience. It was rough, but I can go to sleep at night and say that I'm really proud of what we've got now.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, you guys have been through the ringer with that for sure. Just from the little bits and pieces that I've seen floating around on the limited time that I spend on social media and hearing stuff from mutual friends. And yeah, it's rough. Yeah, I don't think, I just always feel like it's kind of another duty of mine to make sure that people understand that it is another thing that's very important, and they need to, somebody's got to do it. Otherwise, I mean, stuff gets slipped in and taken away, and you just never know. No. But anyway, yeah. So thanks for sharing that. Like I said, it's just important that people step up.
That's exactly right. And I mean, in the last month, I guess, when we were trying to kind of get nominations, and this is the first time we've done this since the club's been reestablished in terms of like nominating officers and voting officers in, seeing, we didn't have a lot of interest and a lot of feedback regarding that. So we were pigeonholed, so to say, and kind of who got it. And they're all fantastic individuals, but there wasn't a lot of involvement. And so, next round, hopefully that will change. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. There needs to be, if you want these types of clubs and organizations to continue, there's got to be some people stepping up to the plate to keep them going, because like I said, it was a rough 2 years, and I didn't want to do it another 2 years with having a kid and finishing up. I've actually finishing up some grad school stuff right now. On top of my master's, I got a master's, and I'm adding hours to it and all this fun stuff. So between that and flying, my own birds and breeding birds, I was like, my 2 year limit's up. I'm ready for somebody else to come take the reins. So
yeah. I mean, I just passed off. I was doing our state club, like, magazine newsletter thing or whatever, and I just passed that off also. And it's just like, I mean, people don't even understand how hard it is just even getting people to even just write an article for something. I mean, just the little things, it's just, like I said, it's, if you want the privileges to continue, people have got to step up, one way or the other. So, well, let's go ahead and get one more, like, a decent hunting story from you. One of the more memorable experiences there.
Good or bad?
Yeah, either or. And then you've already given a lot of good advice, but we can end on that like usual if you want.
Okay.
And then we'll go ahead and call this conversation good and segue into the other one. So.
Sure. So let's see. Do I want to start out with good, or do I want to start out with bad? The bad, I've got a lot more to choose from. So I'll start out with the good one, I guess. So there's been a lot of good experiences and good hunts and everything, but one that comes to my mind was the first jack that I caught solo, kind of by ourselves. It was just me and Dad. No other falconers went out there with us. We went to Texas. It was in Lubbock, and I was nervous because, like, both of us were like, what if we go out here for a week and come back looking like idiots, and we don't catch anything? And we ended up having a great time. But yeah, that first one, I'll never forget it. And the bird I was flying, she was probably about 4 or 5 years old at the time. And she actually ended up getting killed by a jackrabbit. So this is bittersweet because she ended up getting killed by the jack, getting killed by one later that week. So it was awful. But that first jack that they caught, I'll never forget. And we were out there, we were hunting this field. It was, you can imagine, it was windy as all get out, overcast day. And this field was like, so in Lubbock, like I'm sure there's a lot of like bowls. You know what I mean? There's like big kind of bowls that have, sawgrass and cattails and all this crap grow up in it. And so there was this bowl that had all that tall grass on the edge and down into it, and then a flat, just pretty. The field we were hunting in was like my yard out there. There was hardly any grass, and but we knew there was jacks. There was tons of signs, and we could actually seen a couple of jacks. So we went out there, and it was the first slip. And this bird, I was like, she's never even seen a jack before, and she's up there. She might not even chase one. And so I was so nervous, and there went the jack. Well, she bolted off the glove, flew into the wind, and she missed. She missed the jack. And the jack curved, went into the bowl, went into the grass. And that bird, so she jumped back up. Harris hawks are kind of known for their rebound. So when she missed, she jumped right back up and started powerhousing again toward that rabbit. I couldn't see it, and there was a really small tree out there in that bowl, and I thought she was flying to the tree because I was like, she's doing what's natural to her. She's used to being around trees. She's flying up there. She missed. She's done. And I put my head down. I was kind of like looked down and was like, shit. We just missed that first rabbit. She tried, but so I'm lollygagging. The wind's howling. I can't hear anything. And I'm kind of walking to go over there, and I look up, and I'm like, she's not in that tree. And then I heard a squeal, and she was in that grass with that jack by herself that I had to find. And it was easy enough once I got close, and I was just like screaming to Dad. I was like, she got it. She actually got it. And but yeah, I'll never forget that. So I know it's nothing spectacular. It's no crazy story, but it was just one that sticks out. Now for a bad story. I've got a few of those, but I'm going to tell you the one that always comes to mind. So, it was probably, gosh, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. We were flying 5 birds. We had out, and we had caught a couple of rabbits here at one of the spots we hunt at all the time. And there's a railroad track in this spot. And on Saturdays, about 1 o'clock, sometimes there's trains that come through it. And so for some reason, we caught a couple of rabbits. We were heading back to the truck, and the birds were still following us. And this is where the weird part kind of happened. My dad decided, I'm going to put the dogs up. The truck was away, and he said, I'm going to go get the truck and put the dogs up. Then we'll get the birds. And I said, okay, that's fine, whatever. You have to climb up a pretty steep bank to get back up to the main road where we park. It's not a main road, but it's a road. And he went up there and put the dogs up. Well, right about that time that he got up there and I'm making my way back, I kick up a rabbit and the birds catch the rabbit. So I've got like 3 birds on one cottontail and the other ones are dying to get in. So I'm to the point to where I start tossing rabbit out to get the other birds to go to it so I could get these 3 birds off. Well, right about that time, here comes a train. And I'm probably 5 feet away from the tracks on the gravel, And so I've got all these birds. I'm ripping them off and shoving them behind bushes. I'm trying to find my field leashes because I usually keep some where I can tie a bird down. They had fell out. I didn't know where they were. So here I am. Can't get to my phone because I've got like birds tucked under both arms, 2 birds, or, 1 bird's on one rabbit, one's on the one we caught earlier. One is trying to figure out how to get in. This train comes barreling by like the ground shaking. And I end up with all these birds underneath me, like leaned over them and a rabbit while this train goes by. And I'm screaming at the top of my lungs for my dad to hurry up and come down there. And, he kind of pulled the truck up on top of the bank and he looked down and he said, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "What the hell do you think I'm doing? This is a mess." And so he had to slide down the bank. We got all the birds off. Nobody was hurt. Because I just was like, I know one of them has grabbed one another in there, but I was definitely shaken. And then, I guess one of the other stories that's not really long and much to say was, cats. The cats are definitely come back to like, those suck. Like if there's anything bad out there to catch, a cat is definitely up on that list, other than a coyote, as I'm sure, sure that you know. But yeah, we ran into some cat issues. And like just this past, we were in Lubbock again in November, and there was this one spot, and we had hunted it before. It was one of our better cottontail spots. Wasn't great this past time, but anyway, all of a sudden there's cats all in it. So we had to leave. But we were on the T-perch, and you just see a flash for a second. The birds leave, and what is it? There's a cat bolting across the field, and bird grabbed it, and she ended up letting go. And it's just so nasty, But yeah, this past season, I've got more. I guess I've got more. I don't know. Maybe you just remember the bad stories a little bit better than you do the good ones. But yeah, those are fun. And I guess another good story was probably, so we usually get to go see Tom and Jen, once a year. Last year we got to go a couple weeks ago and visit and pick up a bird and everything. We always enjoy that, but going out there and getting to hunt with them and see them do their thing, and then our birds get to go out and hunt, and we caught several rabbits and all that kind of stuff. That's always going to be a memory that I look back on, because I really look up to those two. They mean a lot to me, and being able to spend time in the field with them was really important. So
cool. Yeah, I've gotten a chance to go down and, as you know, and spend some time with them a few different times, and it's always nice getting a chance to go down there and visit. I'd like to be able to hunt with them sometime, but it seems like, I don't know, maybe at like NAFA or something this year, because we're both going to be guest speakers or whatever. Like maybe we can make that happen one day. We'll see. That way they can judge me. They can finally get their chance to fully judge me, I guess. But anyway,
no, they're cool. Yeah, they're cool. They might yell at you a time or two, but you'll be good. Take it as a compliment.
That's not anything I'm not normally used to anyway. No, I love Tom and Jen too. They're good people. But yeah, man. Well, and one thing that did slip my mind, and I completely forgot to ask you earlier. As you know, I'm a huge Dachshund fan and a big fan of hunting with dogs, but you hunt with beagles, right?
I do hunt with beagles,
yeah.
Yep.
Do a quick synopsis of that. I haven't got a chance to really talk to many people. I've hunted with people that have like beagle mixes and whatever, and this, that, and the other. I know other people that hunt with them, but I haven't had a chance to really talk about it yet with them on a podcast. So
the beagles, I agree with you. There's not too many people that you see using beagles in falconry, and when they do, it tends to be on the eastern side of the country, kind of in the southeast, I guess, because right now I'm thinking of a couple of people that hunts with them. And I guess the reason that I started with them was because that was the falconers that I kind of grew up around and who really taught me a lot. So Dennis and Sherry Loudermilk, they live in the next county over, and Dale Liner, they were kind of the ones that I really kind of got involved with, and they had Harris Hawks with beagles, and it just made sense because, like I said, here in East Tennessee, now occasionally when all luck is in your corner, you can find a field where you don't have to have dogs. And so, it's either walkable enough to where, and there's enough rabbits where you can actually just kick them up. But with the dogs and with the beagles, what I really like about them is like a beagle, 9 times out of 10 is not actually interested in actually catching the rabbit. They just want to tell you where the rabbit is and where it was. So when it comes down to like when the birds catch a rabbit and all that kind of stuff, they're not piling in and trying to grab it. And it's not any form of chaos. It's pretty orchestrated for the most part, and it's what I've grown up around. It's what I've always had, and it's what I like. Now, that's not to say that, I haven't got to see too many dachshunds hunt rabbits. I've seen videos, and there was one I've seen a teckle one time we hunted with. I didn't have my birds out. I was with another falconer and kind of watched it. But it's what I'm not used to is beagles are loud. Everything's so loud, and you know where the dogs are. If you can hear the dogs and you can see the birds, you're fine, and you can kind of just take your time and enjoy the hunt. But then, with dachshunds and the very limited experience I've seen, they're a little bit quieter. They yip, from what I've seen, and they seem fun, and like the idea of being able to fit down in holes and all these tight spaces is really appealing to me. But I'm used to something about it is just like, where's the dog? What's going on? I'm so used to being able to hear them. But that's why I really like the beagles. Like I said, what works out perfectly for us. And when we got 3 new ones, I think it was 2 years ago, and they turned out, they're great dogs. They've really worked out. But like gun hunter rejects tend to make good falconry birds because beagles have different speeds, I'm sure and different sizes. And so a lot of gun hunters really like fast dogs. We don't like fast dogs as much. Me and Dad, we prefer the medium to slow speed, just because it gives us more time to when we catch a rabbit, we can get there. And they're not, like I said, they won't run up and grab the rabbit, but they will trample trying to just sniff. So they'll be all over your bird and the dog and the rabbit. But again, they're not trying to get in there and bite it or bite the bird or any of that kind of stuff. And but yeah, and then again, obviously we're not shooting guns, so they're not having to be, if they're gun shy, that's fine. But yeah, that's just what we've always had and what works for us in our area. And I always love seeing other people with their dogs and getting to experience it. But there's definitely some where I'm like, that level of chaos is definitely out. We were flying, we very rarely now fly all 5 or even 4 birds at a time. Most of the time we'll fly 2. If it's a really rough field, or that if it's bigger, we might fly 3 or 4. We run the 3 beagles most of the time. But right there, if we fly 3 birds or 3 beagles, there's 6 moving parts plus us. And I've been, like going with like Jeff Fincher and David Hudson, and they have their dogs, and it's always interesting and so much because it's just chaos. The hawk catches a squirrel, then the dog's got the squirrel, and then like the hawk's riding on the dog's back, and then so like that's like, oh, that's fun to watch. Would I want to do it? No, I'm used to the more controlled. We've got time now. We still have to haul ass to get there, especially if we have to go through like a chest high briars that are super thick. But yeah, that's just what I like, and my experience. I have major respect for anybody else that hunts with dogs, because I really think that elevates your falconry. I cannot imagine here in East Tennessee, and I tell people this all the time when they call, and especially people that are getting started, they start bringing that idea of rabbits into the mix, and they're like, oh, well, we're going to hawk rabbits. And I always ask, are you planning on getting a dog, or do you have one? Because here in East Tennessee, in I would say 90% of the fields you find, there are rabbits, but if you go out there with a stick and just want to kick them up, you might get one slip. You might get 2 slips versus if there's not as many rabbits and you've got beagles, you can run that rabbit over and over and over again and until they get confused or you catch it. And so I think they add a lot to it. They add your success and they add that. It's just so enriching. I would almost feel blind hunting here in East Tennessee without the dogs. So yeah, that's my forte.
Nice. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's not very many people that once they start hunting with dogs ever go back.
Right. I can see that.
And I'll definitely be in that camp until the day I probably can't do this anymore myself too.
And my advice to people about it is, spend some time to research, dogs that would fit your area and the way that you hunt, and go and try to find people that do it so you can talk to them, because a lot of people, and how this goes.
Oh yeah.
You'll say, "Do you have a dog?" And they're like, "Yeah, I got a dog." And it's like a golden retriever or something that walks around the woods with them. And they're like, "Well, I've got a dog." And it's like, that's not the dog you need. You're just adding one unnecessary moving part to this mix, So, but yeah, definitely look into it. And if you live, and I've never hawked in Indiana, and I've so I don't know much about it. But here, everything is very tight, very close spaces, very thick, and like I said, the Dachshund would probably be great for getting into some of these small spots. But for in terms of just tunneling in the briars and running, and the beagles do a good job. The only time the beagles obviously the scent can change based on if it's really warm outside, for example. So like during the spring, we have more difficulty because the scent doesn't stick to the ground as well. So the dogs can't track as well. And, and then wet, if it's somewhere that it's, a swamp area, there probably not going to be any rabbits anyway in it here. But that messes them up. So they've got their downfalls. And again, some people just don't like the loudness of it, but I do. I like it just because, like I said, I know where they're at, and I kind of, it's so satisfying to when your birds learn the game and they learn the dogs and they know how to position themselves, and they're in this great position, and you hear the dogs coming, and that rabbit, what that rabbit's going to do. You're standing there and you're watching, and it does exactly what you think it's going to do, and the hawks catch it. That's like cloud nine, for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and watching and seeing the excitement of the dogs and stuff too, that's part of the other allure of everything for me at this point too. Like watching my dachshunds get excited, and I mean, dachshunds are weird though. I mean, they either open up or they don't, and it's kind of this strange little thing. But two of my dachshunds will definitely open up. I mean, full on, so they're pretty loud. They're loud. Plenty also. But what I like about mine though is that they don't get loud until they're either on a trail or on a rabbit. Until either of those things happen, they're super quiet.
Well, beagles, like when you hunt with them enough, and I'm not, I'm not, like I said, I don't know what your experience is with seeing them, but I mean, they'll let you know, they'll open, but it could be ice cold. You can tell the difference in how they bark is, well, that's cold, and sometimes the cold trail turns into a hot trail, but a lot of the time it doesn't. And then you have some birds or some dogs that cold trail a lot worse than others and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, learning the nuances of your dogs and of the species that you're working with. But going kind of off back to the dachshund thing, that's one thing that, like I said, I have major respect for people that have them, and I would be interested in just seeing more falconry with them, just because, again, it's nobody around here is really doing it.
Well, I'll either come down here or you can come up to my place. You're more than welcome.
We might have to do that, just because, like I said, it's I don't know if I'll probably never be interested in doing it, but I would like to see it. I'm one of those people that love to say I experienced it and love to say I've seen it, even if it may not be for me fully. I'm pretty, again, back on I'm not trying to fix what's not broken here. I like my beagles an awful lot. I can't imagine not having them. But we've actually got a teckle right now. Dad does, but now he's a work in progress. I don't know what it's going to look like. It was kind of a last minute thing where he ended up with him, and I'm thinking, no, why did you get this dog? And it's like, what are we going to do? And so I don't know what his future will be in terms of hawking, because originally, when we kind of said, yeah, we'll take him, some friends very graciously said, we have an extra pup, would you want him? My answer was no. And then I said, I better call the dog guy. And he said, yeah, I want him. And he wanted to use him for blood tracking.
Yeah.
For deer hunters. And it's just been one thing after another where we've not really had time. But yeah, he might have a future with us in the falconry side of things. He might not, but it's different. We get so used to having this system and the dogs and everything that it's like, why are you throwing another one in?
All the power to you, man. I mean, I'm all about not fixing, what's not broke too. I mean, I'm right there with you. So, if you got a system that works for you, hey, I would never try and change that for you. But I'm just saying, if you ever want to see any other stuff,
I'll see it. I'll come watch it.
Yeah.
I'll be more than glad to come watch it.
Yeah,
and you're more than welcome down here to come and see what we've got going on. But yeah, we need to right now on our agenda, other than get I'm training one young male and to get these other birds tied out. And kind of get their weights getting dropped and everything. I'll do that in the next couple of weeks. But we need to scout some more. We lost a couple of fields this last season. As you know, it's always rough.
Yep.
So we drove. It was actually one of those rare luck spots that I mentioned earlier to where we never had to take dogs. And it was like 45 minutes away. So, we had to get on the interstate to get there and all that kind of stuff. And that when you live in the middle of nowhere, getting on the interstate means that, you're going on a trip. But yeah, we went and pulled in and it was all cleared. Every bit of it was gone, and they were putting up storage units. So we have to scout a little bit this year.
Yep.
Soon.
It's the nature of the beast. It's the unfortunate reality that we're going to keep facing year after year.
Mm-hmm. And I'm very I feel like here in this part of the country, let me rephrase that. Here where I live in East Tennessee, it happens, but it doesn't happen as much as it does in other places, especially with going to the controversial squirrel hawking thing. A lot of the squirrel places that we've got are the woods, and some of them, there's more than one that's kind of squirrel and rabbits. It's got a thick understory, but they tend to be not touched as much. You know what I mean?
Sure.
There's people that come in and cut them for timber or lumber or whatever. And that really good field I referenced way long time ago that I liked when I first started, it's gone. It got completely sold and cut. But for a lot of the, when you talk about squirrel hawking, yeah, there's risks and things happen, and I won't go on that tangent too much, but for here, the woods tend to stick around for the most part, and there's not too many random transformers in the woods, and you can kind of get away from people. Versus rabbit hawking, it's like everywhere you go, there's a risk.
Yep,
it's like you're either around people, you're around roads, you're around here. We have to fight chickens. That's something that we deal with a lot over here. Is everybody's got chickens, and so. Yeah, there's definitely some. We're lucky in some ways, but we're also in the same boat. But like now, Texas, every year we're to the point last year when we went to Lubbock, where we had to question, are we going to try this again in Lubbock, because it's crazy, the development. Houses are shooting up left and right. Places are getting cleared. People are everywhere, absolutely everywhere, to where it would just it made hawking a challenge. So. It's definitely the reality of what falconry is kind of shifting into, which is really sad. But enjoy what you've got and don't take it for granted, because it might not be there next day.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. And I think that's probably a good note to at least end this conversation on. I think I've remembered to cover most of what I was intending to cover anyway, at least for this part of it. So, yeah, man. I mean, thanks again for taking the time to do this. And yeah, I guess if there's still time, we'll go ahead and launch into the other one after a short break or something.
Sure.
But yeah, man, this has been fun. Thanks again for being willing to do it.
Not sure that anything that I said was too fantastic, and I hope I didn't offend too many people. But there you go.
The one of the newest favorite sayings that I've heard recently and have adopted, because I'm a big fan of it, is unfortunately reality doesn't care about your feelings.
There you go.
Facts don't care about your feelings.
That is a fantastic saying.
Yeah. So I've become a big fan of that since I heard it. And hey, we all have uncomfortable realities that we have to face.
We do.
And I don't think we said anything that was too awful controversial.
No, I was just bull crapping around.
I know.
But yeah, it'll. We'll see.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, like I said, thanks again.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. We'll go ahead and call this one good and move on to the next. So, for all of you that are listening to the end of this, stay tuned. If you haven't become a member yet, we're gonna do a Follies episode, and join us there.